We brought her to the city. She comes to Ohio and she gets killed.
She was covered in blood when she ran from that apartment.
She just slipped out of his hands.
The amount of blood and the blood spattering, this was a horrible homicide.
She stabbed the lady in the neck.
We knew that he was either in on it or he knew who the killer was.
This is my last chance. She was the last suspect that we had to go on.
When an investigation runs out of leads, it becomes a cold case. Years pass, and hope fades. But for the families of the victims, these cases are never cold. The truth takes time. On a quiet Sunday morning, Anna Mae Florence gets ready for a day of shopping with her family. There's a knock at the door, but it's not who she's expecting. Her killer slips away, leaving a single clue, a partial bloody fingerprint.
That morning, Anna Mae Florence was waiting for her sister and brother-in-law to pick her up. They were going to go for a day of shopping. Lily and Alonzo went up to her apartment. Anna started screaming inside the apartment. Anna Mae yells out to Alonzo to kick the door in. As he's getting ready to kick it, this woman comes running out. She was covered in blood when she ran from that apartment.
Alonzo had her. He had her tight. But she just slipped out of his hands.
Alonzo chased after her. It said as she was running away, she told me to get away from her or she would shoot. Alonzo came back.
And they went in there and they found her on the floor and she was bleeding quite a bit.
They found her with a cord around her neck.
She was conscious. He asked her, "Who is that?" She said she didn't know. And then she was gone.
She's been stabbed, she's been beaten, she's been murdered. Just like if she's gone, they've taken her away from us.
When we entered Anna Mae's apartment, it was apparent that there had been an extensive struggle. There was some overturned furniture, and then the amount of blood and the blood spattering. The knife wounds near her neck. There's going to be probably arterial gushing, squirting all over the place as she is struggling with the assailant. This was a horrible homicide.
They were going through that place. They collected a fan, a chair, several large items of property. Out of all the evidence that they collected in that place, the real evidence was a single bloody print.
The fingerprint was gold in this case.
The detectives cut out a portion of the wall that had one unidentified partial print.
It made sense that this female inside the apartment just had bumped her hand along the wall enough to make the fingerprint.
She was my dad's sister that I dearly loved. And she was brought up here by her sisters and brothers from Alabama. We brought her to the city to give her a different look of life. And she comes to Ohio and she gets killed. We cleaned out the apartment. There was blood where she lied on the floor. The police kept saying they had nothing really to go on. All they had was what my aunt told them, that she was a black girl.
The detectives back then, they used what they had to work with. DNA wasn't around yet. Fingerprints, interviews, and that's all they had. The original detectives thought that suspect lived in that neighborhood, so they canvassed the area.
They had talked to several neighbors. You did have witnesses that saw a young female dressed up really nice, going door to door, asking for money. One witness had said back then it was for a funeral.
The detectives interviewed several young girls that lived in the neighborhood that fit the description. They took fingerprints, hoping to get a match to the partial print that they had got from the crime scene. At that point, they all met with negative results, and none of them could be charged. At this point, there's nothing. We're just waiting for that one piece of evidence, that one phone call. There was a tip called in. This tip had some valuable information.
The day after it happened, I was over to some friend's house.
He had been at a party, and he had heard a female talking about her involvement in the homicide.
He thought it was him that she stabbed the lady. She stabbed the lady in the neck. Stabbed her 2 or 3 times.
Here you have somebody that calls in on their own, anonymously, with information about a homicide case. How great is that?
When I heard her talking about it, then she had scratches on her hands and stuff, you know, I guess when somebody had been grabbing her, and she had a couple bruises on her arm.
Hell, you could run all day with this stuff.
The only reason I'm doing this is because, you know, I have people that live over there.
Well, we need all the help we can get. Do you want to give us your name at this time?
No, not really.
He didn't want to give his name up because he had promised he would not say anything to anybody.
Not for sure.
The detectives tell him, you're not a suspect in this.
Okay, my name is Odell. O-D-E-L-L.
He provided his social security number and his birthday. Odell was a big lead.
I know the person that did the crime.
Okay. Do you know her name?
Yeah.
Odell said, well, the suspect was a female by the name of
Anita Campbell.
Danita.
I knew Danita pretty well. We went to school together for 3 years.
We wanted to obviously talk to Odell in person.
He came into headquarters.
We asked Odell if he would be willing to make contact with Danita.
So would you consider helping us by wearing a wire?
Yeah.
This was a big development.
He was gonna try to help in trapping Danita.
But then all of a sudden, he decided he didn't want to be involved. At that point, the detectives lost all contact with Odell.
Frustrated, yes. I would say half the time informants disappear. Their world just doesn't coincide with law enforcement's world a lot of the times.
But with the information from Odell, they still have one promising lead. They were interested in tracking down Danita to get her prints and try to compare them to the print that was on the wall. There was plainclothes officers looking for her. And once they had located Danita driving around in her vehicle, a traffic stop was conducted. She was removed from the vehicle. Her prints were taken right there on the hood of her car. The detectives took the prints to the fingerprint unit, and they compared those fingerprints to that fingerprint on the wall. They thought it had to be a match. It had to be Danita.
The original detectives had one unidentified partial print, so they were attempting to match this print to Danita. They did locate her, and they got her prints at the scene. At that point, that's all they had to work with, and that took some time. They were in there for a while.
If it's a poor quality print, you may look at it for days.
There was a smear of blood on the print that was on the wall. So the quality of the fingerprint taken wasn't that good.
The detectives that had originally worked that back in 1987, they did good work. But at that point, they had nothing else to go on.
Police wasn't gonna find that girl. Police wasn't gonna find her because nobody was talking.
If people do not talk to the police, your chances of solving crimes are basically shot.
The girl was gone. She was gone.
When your information dries up, you come to an abrupt halt. Anna Mae's case went to the edge of the desk, and we had to move on to other cases.
The police kept saying they had nothing really to go on. That's why it became a cold case.
My dad, he just couldn't handle that. He was angry. Every week he was calling a detective, find that girl who killed my sister.
I wanted that girl to be found so that he could have peace. It actually aged him and made him die faster.
Before he passed, he made me promise that I would find that girl who killed his sister. I knew that I had to do it.
After her father's dying wish, Becky makes hundreds of phone calls to the police, trying to reopen her aunt's case. One fateful day, a new detective answers her call.
I was at my desk, and the phone rang.
I asked her, who's working on the case?
She's talking, I'm punching on the computer, pulling this up, making sure we actually do have a case. When I saw the details that led up to the homicide, you're sitting there thinking this is a true victim. Anna Mae Florence, church-going woman in her own home, and somebody just came in and just tore that family apart. Senseless. These people need answers to their case.
Nobody is at peace until these cases are solved. There comes a time, whether a case be 5 years old, 10 years old, 30 years old, God wants it taken care of.
We pretty much started at the beginning. For me to get a feel for Anna Mae, I had to go to the cemetery itself. And it just makes it more real for me. It may not work for another detective, but it works. It works for me.
The evidence may be old, the people may be older, but to us it's new. It's just happened.
As I was reviewing the case, my focus was that we needed a new angle. I wanted to look back into evidence, witnesses, prints, and the crime scene, try to find anything missed in the original investigation.
Everything happened inside the apartment. That's where the story is. This is the aerial shot as it looks today. The crime scene would have been in this area here. That has since been torn down, and new houses have been built on that site. The crime scene was torn down after this murder.
The crime scene's gone. We need to find something that the original detectives missed, but we were going to have to do it with the site of the crime completely demolished.
All we have left is the evidence.
We came up with a game plan. Okay, we're going to go over to the property room and we're going to look at the evidence. This stuff has to be done. You know, there ain't no fiddle around with this stuff. You just do it.
People either remember, they don't remember, they lie, or they don't lie. But your evidence never lies. In cold case, your job is to find out what happened to the victim, and a lot of times you're turning back time. We knew this was going to be made on prints. So we're trying to look at this evidence for prints, any identified prints, anything they missed. The crime scene was really bloody. You know, we knew that the suspect had touched certain things. This chair was kind of tipped over in the crime scene like that. This fan was also tipped over and was close to the victim's body. This butcher knife here is the actual murder weapon. It was found laying next to the victim. This door was really bloody. This poor lady, she was struggling for her life in there. That's what it says, just by looking at the evidence. At some point during the struggle, the victim was struck, possibly with this part of the phone, by the suspect. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me. Yeah, it bothers me, but puzzle's not together till you check all these pieces. We gotta find something else as a clue. Before we gotta keep going here. As I was going through every piece of evidence, we had found some tapes.
There were 6 cassette tapes.
There was a second interview of Odell.
We turned back to the key informant from the original investigation, Odell.
Maybe on these tapes, he said something else.
Who even knew that those cassette tapes were even going to play after being 25 years in storage?
Are there any other details that you can recall from that conversation?
She also said that the lady had a Social Security check.
She didn't take the check?
No, she didn't take the check on the purse.
We knew the welfare check. It was still in the purse. Only the killer would know that the victim had a welfare check in her purse.
Are there any other details that you can recall from overhearing that conversation?
She also said that the lady had a Social Security check.
She didn't take the check?
No, she didn't take the check on the purse. Just the paper money.
Now, there's no way that that information had been leaked out to the public. The only reason that Odell would have known about that check being in the victim's purse is if he had been told by Danita. If we could find a better fingerprint, I could put her inside that apartment. Back in 1987, a traffic stop was conducted. Her prints were taken on the hood of her car. At that time, just one print was noticed at the scene, but it was a partial fingerprint. We couldn't match that print up with Danita. What other evidence do we got? I have to use those photos from 25 years earlier to piece things together. I want to see it. So I'm trying to place things where it had been documented. Anna Mae's purse was laying there, right by the kitchen counter, in close proximity of where Anna Mae was found on the floor. There was a lot of blood. It was a violent scene. There was a lot. You could tell that there was a big struggle inside that place. And you're talking a small apartment. There was blood on the phone cord, and the phone had a lot of blood on that. Anna Mae must have turned her back. The suspect struck her on the head with the phone. Anna Mae could have possibly grabbed a knife from the kitchen in self-defense. The suspect would have overpowered Anna Mae, taken the knife from her, then proceeded to stab Anna Mae. Then somebody came to the door, which would have been Anna's brother-in-law, Alonzo. We know that she went over and she stood next to the window by the front door. because that's where she had left a bloody fingerprint on the wall. I'm looking through the photographs, and there was a sense that there's something wrong. Something's missing, something's not where they're supposed to be. Did I miss something? I'm trying to find something that the original detectives back in 1987 had missed. Something seemed out of place. There was a jar of mayonnaise sitting on the chair by the front door. It just kind of stood out. It just seemed in a weird location. Probably wouldn't have paid too much attention to it if the mayonnaise was on the kitchen counter. If she made a sandwich for lunch, that mayonnaise jar wouldn't be sitting on the couch, it'd be in the kitchen. Maybe Danita touched the mayonnaise jar. So I started looking at the evidence list. They got the fan and the phone and the knife. Lo and behold, that jar of mayonnaise had been collected. I want to see the mayonnaise jar. I proceeded to the property room with Kim, the latent examiner, and we looked for the evidence.
We're pulling all the evidence out, and I mean, we pulled everything out.
The detectives back in that era in the 70s and 80s, they didn't have the technology. Now, there's new technology where we can retest evidence.
That jar was brought back to this lab, and it was processed by superglue fuming. They use super glue, and they put it in a little metal tin with some water and the heat, and it will fume, and it adheres to all the sweat that was left behind. I looked at this over and over and over again with my magnifier, and I really examined the whole entire thing. And then right where the rim is, there was a fingerprint.
I'm like, holy crap. After 25 years in storage, she found a print on this mayonnaise jar, and she says, this is a good print.
The strange thing is that fingerprint flowed in the wrong direction on how you would open a jar, because, you know, most people would grab it like this, and twist like that, but this fingerprint was just like that, as if the mayonnaise jar was held upside down, maybe as a weapon. Probably when the person knocked on the door, she panics and picked this up.
At that point, everything started making sense. Let's just compare Danita's prints to that fingerprint on the mayonnaise jar, and then we got her. I go over to the property room and look for Danita's fingerprints. But they're not in the file. They're gone. We found out that the detectives lost the fingerprint card. Unbelievable. We needed to have her fingerprinted again. So now we had to track down Danita. You know, luckily, there had been a warrant out for Danita. A real light warrant. It pays to write people for jaywalking. You know, I don't know how many cases, you solved by just someone being issued a warrant for something so small.
They arrest her and they bring her into headquarters and have her re-fingerprinted.
Ralph brings me this fingerprint card and says, Kim, you need to do it quick. Compared that to the known print off the mayonnaise jar.
While Kim was going over, the fingerprint, seeing if it was a match, we're doing a good interview.
Kathy could be a bull. She's wanting her to admit that she killed that woman, but she won't. The only problem was, we only got a certain amount of time. It's a jaywalking warrant, it's not a murder warrant. We can't keep her here for 12 hours for something like this. If you're interviewing your suspect and this is your one and only interview and you throw something out there that they know is crap, you're done.
It was a lot of pressure because we cannot make any mistakes. We have to be 100% accurate.
After 26 years, finally we found that one piece of evidence that we needed. The thumbprint on the mayonnaise jar. And sitting in an interview room on a jaywalking warrant, we got our suspect, Danita.
I'm looking at the print, looked at the mayonnaise jar, but it's not Danita.
The prints did not match. We're back to square one.
Kathy would call me like 2 or 3 times a week. You could tell that she really wanted to solve the case.
It made me feel good to tell stories about my aunt. Anna Mae was born in Alabama. Things were different in the South. Restrooms still had black and white on them, and they were also still sitting at the back of the bus. The Ku Klux Klan was very prevalent. It was a different time.
When Annie Mae's husband died, she didn't have no kids. My father insisted that she come here to Columbus, and
My aunt's sisters and brothers, they felt as though had they left her in Alabama, she would have still been alive.
The family didn't deserve that. This woman didn't deserve that. As a detective, they're putting all their trust in you to solve the case. It doesn't make any sense at all. Why would Odell implicate Danita? Either he was in on it or he knew he was involved.
The original detectives lost Odell 30 years ago. They just let him go.
So I did a search on driver's license, and after a couple days, we had tracked down his new home address.
We kind of felt like this is it.
We need to finish this up.
We went out to talk to him, armed with a tape recorder and the tape. And we said, Odell, we have to straighten this out.
Okay, my name is Odell.
Okay.
O-D-E-L-L.
Uh-huh.
That is you on that tape.
65 Edinburgh. That's E-D-E-N-B-U-R-G-H.
And he said, yeah, that's my address. That's my social security number. But that's not my voice.
And I was livid. I've had it. You know, this is on tape here. You know, they recorded you back then. Who else would it be?
He said, that's not me, I'll tell you why. Yeah, that's my previous address, but the way that guy's spelling Edinburgh, I couldn't have spelled that like that. Because I can't read and I can't write. It kind of shocked me, but it hit me with, he's telling the truth. He can't read and write. This case is really weird because the informant had provided accurate information. However, the information about his own personal identity and the identity of the suspect was inaccurate.
And he gets all emotional, tearing up, crying, and he got scared. Because whoever's on this tape is providing officers with his name, his social security number.
So the next question to him is, who do you know that knows that much about you? And he listened to the tape several times and said, you know who that sounds like? My cousin Chris. Back in '87, Odell used to apply for jobs at an unemployment office. His cousin Chris would always go with him, and his cousin Chris would fill out his applications.
Back in 1987, Chris is the one who came to headquarters and saying he was Odell. The original detectives didn't look at a picture ID. How stupid is that?
I want to meet Chris in person. I want to look at him. I want to talk to him. I mean, not over the phone. I want to sit across the table from him. And I want to look him in the eye.
If there was one person that could tell us the truth as to what had happened, it was Chris.
At this point, we have identified our informant and we have his real identity. Now we need to interview him. So we go up to the residence. His mom answers the door and he's sitting right there. We finally are face to face with our informant. He was getting nervous. If you called in that tip back in 1987, you're not thinking that 20-something years later, you're going to be sitting across from a couple of detectives and they're going to hit you with the facts. That would make me nervous. Explain to him, we're trying to find out who killed this woman, and good cop, bad cop stuff, forget that. You got 2 homicide detectives sitting in your house and I want to know what's going on. He denied anything about a tip. He denied it.
So I said, you're the one that initiated this. You're the one that started this back in 1987. We're just trying to finish this up. Chris was not forthcoming with any information.
Chris, family members are calling and they want to know what happened to their aunt. If something happened to your relatives, would you want us to be doing this? And he continued to deny it. We're at a point where, okay, he's not going to admit it. What can we really do?
I'd have to say the turning point was his mother. I had Chris's mom listen to that cassette tape, and I said, do you know who this voice is? We need Chris to tell us the truth. She told her son, you tell them detectives what you know. Too much time's gone by, you be honest with them. There was some trembling in his voice.
He said that he did call in the tip. He does admit to knowing Danita. He said she's innocent. Somebody else did it.
Then he told us what some other girl had told him back in 1987, the day after the homicide had taken place. He said, we were just friends. She came over and sat on my porch, and she had to tell me something. She said that she owed a drug dealer some money, and she was going door to door asking for money. Anna Mae had given her a couple dollars. She saw that there was more money in that purse. That's what took over.
This is all we need from you. We need a real name.
And he says, Zena Roberson. And he says, I've held on to this for all these years just because she was my friend. He had posed as Odell because he wanted somebody arrested for that homicide. He just didn't want Zena. And he had heard that Danita was involved in some illegal activity. Thought that, okay, she'll go to jail for this and I'll feel a lot better, you know, knowing I kept my secret with Zena. For 26 years, you keep that secret. The family didn't need 26 years of unknown. If we had not confronted him, he would never have said anything. Zena was the last suspect that we had to go on. This is my last chance. That case goes back up on the shelf. Zena was the last suspect that we had to go on. This is my last chance.
The name Zena is a real uncommon name, but in our searches, you have to have more than a name.
We knew that Zena lived 2 doors down from where Chris used to live back in 1987. After doing a computer check, come to find out, she had a driver's license when she was 16.
Finally, we get a hit. She was arrested in Georgia, a shoplifting charge.
So her prints are on file.
Had to send away for the prints. They were actually in Georgia. Kathy said, Kim, if this isn't her, you're not gonna look at any more people. This is it, I'm done.
These prints are gonna put her in that house, or the case goes back up on the shelf. I'll call Becky up and say, hey, Becky, we gave it the best shot we had. I have nothing further to run with.
I'm looking at these fingerprints. Pulled out Zita's fingerprint card. I look down on my desk with my magnifier, make that right thumb. I look at it, kind of raised up. So I look at it again. And I said, oh, got her. We got her, Zena.
We know that the fingerprints match, but we don't get happy until we make an arrest. This is the first new suspect in 26 years, and there's a possibility she's somewhere in the Rome, Georgia area. We got to the Rome Police Department, and we met with the detective that was going to assist us. Because at that point, we wasn't sure if Zena was there. They said that what we normally do for stuff like this, they have a Facebook. So they took the picture of her, put it on their Facebook page. They didn't say what for, but they just said, has anybody seen this woman? I don't think it was 2 minutes they got a response. A person answered and said, this is a lady I see at the bus stop at this intersection every morning. And we went, wow. And we said, we have this address we want to check.
We get to her apartment.
At that point, you know, you're kind of on alert. You don't know what's going to happen when she opens that door. So when you make your move, you gotta make sure you're making the right move. If there's 10, 15 people in there, that might be a real bad situation.
The door opened, and I wasn't even sure right off the top of my head that was her.
She answered the door. She could have slammed it in our faces, but she didn't.
You know, and I said, we're homicide cold case detectives from Columbus, Ohio.
You could kind of read it on her face. It was kind of like between shock and relief. Kind of like, I knew you were coming. I didn't know when, but I knew this was going to happen.
She invited us in, and she reached to the ledge of the couch, you know, to ease herself into the seat. And I've never seen anything like it. But every pore on her body opened up. And I mean, it looked like a river coming from the top of her head all the way down.
You describe it as a poison, and it poisons your system, and it poisons your whole life, because you're not running, but you're not turning yourself in either.
Nothing needed to be said. It was just body language.
You know, she kind of looked down. She knew, I know why you guys are here.
She says, I used to live in Columbus, but I don't know anything about homicide. And I said, well, you gotta come with us.
We knew we had her.
Zena, like I mentioned, I'm Kathy. This is where I kind of caught you off guard this morning.
We start the interview, and of course, right away, we want to, get through that rights waiver.
Anything you say can be used against you for what you mean.
Get that out of the way.
If you're unable to pay a lawyer will be appointed for you.
A lot of our suspects, they want to know how caught they are, and once they realize they're caught, they don't want to play anymore. You can almost hear her thinking.
Are you willing to talk with us? And or at least hear what we have to say? Yeah, I hear what I have to say. Okay.
The real element we needed was her to admit she had never been in that apartment, because we knew we had evidence putting her there.
But none in that apartment we believe can possibly be self-defense. But the only one that can tell us that is you.
Once the word lawyer comes out of their mouth, your interview's over. However they say it. You think I need a lawyer? Will somebody call me a lawyer? And I'm just getting the feeling that she's gonna say the word here in a minute. So I pulled out a picture of the victim.
How about this woman here? Do you know her?
I kind of wanted to shock her into this.
You ever been to her place?
You're never in her apartment. You don't know who she is.
We had her in the apartment. We have 2 separate fingerprints from Zena inside Anna Mae's apartment.
You can help yourself out here, okay? I'm being truthful.
She said it 3 times, I believe. She had never been inside Anna Mae Florence's apartment.
Zena, tell us what happened.
What do you know?
Tell us what happened.
No, I won't do it.
All right, Zena.
Good luck to you.
She just wasn't somebody you just threw away. She was somebody to care about. And I did love her, and I still love her, and she meant a lot to the family. I spoke up for my aunt in the courtroom. I don't know if she cared or not, but it made me feel good to tell her.
Kathy Justice and Ralph Taylor bring closure to Anna Mae's family. After 27 long years, the mystery of who killed Anna Mae is finally solved.
We love them, and we appreciate everything they did for us.
And we appreciate you guys all hanging together as family. Family is important.
Before there was not an ending, now there's an ending.
Becky said you was a hound dog.
Well, you know, Anna Mae, she deserves some justice out of that.
That was the first time I really started feeling peace. I felt that her spirit now can rest.